If you ask me in this very moment if there is any game where you complete the campaign and afterwards you feel disappointed there aren't a few more levels to clear before you go to bed, purely out of exhaustion and sensory overload, I can safely say Lollipop Chainsaw RePOP is what you're looking for. And I mean that as a compliment, not because I think the remaster of this title is too short to justify the $40.50 you spend on it, should you decide to buy it right now. Lollipop Chainsaw is one of those games that back in the day you just grab off the shelf at your local retailer without any hesitation, solely because the front cover activated a certain neuron, but after 2 hours of playing, you'd come to realize you had unlocked a lot more abilities and collectibles than skimpy dresses for your character. It's almost like the opposite of false advertisement. An anti-clickbait, if you will, when we talk about the modern day internet space. And if that doesn't say enough about why this game is the most entertaining title I've played so far this year, allow me to take you on a little bus ride around the fictional town of San Romero. You are Julia Starling, a cheerleader. A girl whose aware her beauty can be as dangerous as a spike trap, but still likes receiving compliments about not being overweight, just because that's a woman's nature. So is her love for sweets and cute outfits. But nothing can compare to how much she likes her boyfriend, Nick Carlisle. He's not much different than her in the sense that he looks like the ordinary neurotypical kid, sporty, extroverted, loud. His baseball jacket is not only an accessory, it's part of his identity, the king and the queen of the classroom. A match made in heaven. Or is it? Well, it turns out the pearly gates of heaven are nowhere near close enough to grant the inhabitants of San Romero safety. A new horrifying reality appears before Juliet's eyes as she is making haste to meet with her boyfriend in front of the school they attend. The barrier between the rotten world and our planet has been cracked open, as a result of which malicious gases have seeped into the realm of the living, turning people left and right into mindless zombies. From this point on, the story takes a sharp turn towards insanity, as Nick risks his life to save Juliet from a monster but gets bitten in the process. Out of sheer love and dedication for her boyfriend, Juliet whips out a chainsaw and cuts his head off so that he can die as a human. The end. Surely that's not the grand finale of the story, right? And you'd be correct if you thought it was a bit anticlimactic. It is, however, the end of Nick's and Juliet's ordinary lives, as one of them has to cope with turning into a mere keychain, and the other coming to terms with slaying her own classmates. After this not so brief of a synopsis, I think it should become very clear what you're in for. It's a story that's not supposed to be taken seriously by any stretch of the imagination. The narrative of Lollipop Chainsaw is there to glue the other aspects of the game together, just so that the final product makes sense as a whole. It's like one of those shallow slapstick animes you'd watch on a Friday night to wind down and have a bit of a laugh, nothing more, nothing less. With that being said, I think it's high time we talk about the true star of the show, which of course is the gameplay. Lollipop Chainsaw RePOP is mostly a third-person action game with a heavy focus on melee combat. I would even say it's more of a hybrid depending on the types of enemies you have to get rid of, for instance, bosses which cannot be defeated unless you utilize your launcher for a good portion of the fight, or when you have to shoot down flying corpses. But overall the most satisfying facet of the gameplay is doing combos with your magical chainsaw and kicking the no-living shit out of zombies. In this regard, Lollipop Chainsaw is very similar to games like Bayonetta, minus the horrible camera angles of course, and Devil May Cry 3. Many of you are probably asking yourselves where the RePOP is, which is basically the censored version, and it's right here just behind the original. There's also time trials serving the role of a simplistic form of multiplayer where you try to climb your way up the scoreboard beating other people's times. The game boasts 21 button combinations you can unlock as you progress through the campaign, and a wide variety of items which are essential for boosting your character's stats like max health, strength, your cannon's effective range, and recovery time after being incapacitated. Those abilities and upgrades plus various other things like costumes, art, MP3s can be purchased on the Shop-to-Shop website that you can access through terminals located in certain parts of the levels. Speaking of the levels, they're quite linear and easy to navigate through, also very thematic, which kind of gives you an idea of what each boss might look like unless the game decides to show them to you in advance. For example, at Obama's farm, a stage during my playthrough where I had to chop down hallucinogenic mushrooms and getting high in the process, I basically ended up fighting a demonic hippie. Another recurring motif in Lollipop Chainsaw is that each one of the bosses, also known as Dark Purveyors, were musicians, and some of them were obviously based upon actual famous artists like this guy, who's totally not an allusion to Marilyn Manson, or T-Pain with his auto-tune voice, and I presume that's Walter David, the frontman of The Exploited. The king of rock and roll towards the end of his career wasn't spared either. The other bosses were either loosely modeled after people I'm not familiar with, or a combination of all the tropes the respective genre represents. Like, seriously, how cool is that? Imagine if a studio nowadays decided to make a character resembling Drake or, I don't know, Ice Spice. That's never gonna happen. Long gone are the days when satire used to make people laugh, and intellectual property lawsuits were more than tools to make people with dying careers squeeze a pretty penny from businesses on the uprise. While on the topic of money, there are two types of tokens you can use to purchase stuff in-game: gold and platinum medals. Gold medals are quite literally everywhere, monsters give you lots of those upon dying, but so do trash cans, vending machines, lockers, and probably a few other props I haven't yet tried to destroy. Platinum medals, however, can be obtained upon performing sparkle hunting, a move where you have to decapitate 3 or more zombies zombies at once. The second method, as far as I know, is buying one of those Nick tickets from the Chop to Shop marketplace and start mashing the Y buttons if your life depends on it. You can also buy a single platinum token for like 500 gold coins, which is by far the worst option. Just don't do that in your first run, please. And the final way of getting your hands on the precious material shekels is pretty much murdering the undead in quick succession. Some items can only be exchanged for gold and others sorted for platinum. So that's basically how the economy in this game works. There is no online stores, bundles, loot boxes. What you see is what you get. Pure, unadulterated blast from the past. The way it's always meant to be. And I love it. I love it so much so that I almost forgot to mention how much I hate certain types of enemies, namely the cops and the breakdancers. Now, my problem with the dancing zombies is more so with the fact that sometimes I zone out and it takes me a second or two to realize my enemy is almost 100% immune to close range attacks unless I kill the guy with the boombox who's controlling them. The police officers, however, were the sole NPCs that actually got me mad at some point, partially because I believe they're the only long range weapons users that aren't bosses, and also they're quite effective at stun locking you. Frustration is inevitable, especially when you're getting into the groove and you see 2 or 3 of them in the opposite end of a straight, just taking turns at being annoying. It's pretty dumb, I'm not gonna lie, but I'm coming from the standpoint of someone who's not an expert at Lollipop Chainsaw. In fact, that's probably one of the few times I was using a controller for a non-racing game, and I'm obviously very clumsy with my right thumbstick, so if there's any specific attack that works on them right off the bat, just let me know. I'm dying to learn how to deal with those bastards in a swift manner. All that aside, I personally think the enemy variety was pretty decent, at least for a game that would have taken me about 4 hours to complete, had I not shoved my nose into every nook and cranny searching for lollipops and Nick tickets. Each level would introduce 3 or 4 enemy types with their respective gimmicks, like the suicide bombers, the flying scarecrow torsos, crawlers, deceased football players, and even passive zombies like infected cows and horses that only attack you if you lash out at them yourself. There's also minigames that, for better or worse, are an inseparable part of the campaign, but I found them entertaining enough and a cool change of pace, especially the top-down games and the 2G platformer one at the Full Chiffon Center. But that's pretty much what Japanese do best. They just love switching it up on us mid-game. Nier, Automata and Replicant are other 2 good examples of titles known for going back and forth between camera angles, and it works mainly because it's done very tastefully and sparingly, which is also the case for Lollipop Chainsaw. Interface-wise, the game totally knocks it out of the park. The UI pretty much acts as a support pillar for the incredibly arcadey nature of the gameplay, with all those numbers stacking up, the zombie kill counter on the left hand side of the screen, and of course the countless button prompts that, albeit eye-gouging, are also somewhat aesthetically pleasing. Every part of it looks like something cut out from an old comic book, and it's just nice to look at. The main menu is of course following along that same manga/comics art style as your health bar and score counter, and is ever so casually reminding me of the era when video game menus just used to pull you in with their simplicity and swank, instead of being an absolute nightmare to decipher. But what is a game review without mentioning the graphics and overall visuals in the said game? To answer your question, it's an incomplete analysis, so let me quickly gloss over what I think you, the viewer, might be interested in. As far as I was able to see, the PC port of Lollipop Chainsaw offers better texture quality and more natural colors compared to the original, which is a nice thing to have, especially for people who care about stuff like that. You can also crank the resolution up to 4K if you own a more recent GPU and a decent mid-range processor. I'd say any RTX graphics card that has 8 or more GB of VRAM is already an overkill at 1080p, so unless you have a tower built in 2015, you should be good to go. Graphically, the game feels like a mix between modern and old school, with an abundance of squeaky clean floors reflecting adjacent surfaces, but there's also quite a lot of static lighting and fixed shadows to remind us Lollipop Chainsaw is first and foremost a stylized game, and we should treat it as such. There's also decals when you hack walls, and the particle effects you see in combat combined with the uplifting soundtrack make you feel like you've hit the jackpot every time you cut down an enemy. One thing that left me very pleasantly surprised was, believe it or not, the physics in this game. You know me, I'm a sucker for interactivity that goes far beyond scripted sequences, so when I saw I could destroy wooden structures, shelves, break glass, and blow up barrels, that became like a personal mission of mine up until the very last cutscene. If you can make someone like me dribble a ball at the very beginning of a mission for 3 minutes straight, as far as I'm concerned, you've earned your pay as a game developer. I can't really say much about the characters in this game apart from the very obvious fact that Juliet's family is way out there. Her mom is objectively the most normal member of the family, calm, collected, and her voice has got that sort of comforting texture, suggesting that everyone feels at peace when they get back home. The dad is so reckless that it makes me wonder how he survived all those years without losing a limb or two. The oldest sister seems to be the calculated risk type of person, the kind of woman who got all the best traits from both her parents, and the youngest member of the family is, to no one's surprise, also the most insane one. She's a total nutjob, obnoxious, and hands down the least likable character in the game. The dialogue is more often than not very cringe-inducing, sometimes leaning on the raunchy side, but it's obviously what the writers were aiming for. Just something to go along with the ridiculous nature of the game, and they just nailed it. Now I'd like to point out a few negatives about Lollipop Chainsaw RePOP, all of which are related to different types of bugs which occurred primarily in the final third of the story. The first one was me getting stuck in the geometry a couple of times, but weirdly enough I was able to escape without having to restart the level. So if you see any type of flora that's taller than grass, whether it's a tree you have to saw down, or any type of potted plants, just be careful around them. In the second to last chapter there was one part where you had to take an industrial elevator all the way up to the top of the cathedral, and in order to succeed you had to kill zombies falling down the platform you're standing on before it reaches its weight limit. Well, the first time I tried to clear that stage, the game bugged out on me and I was like, great, now I have to restart the entire level. Thankfully the last autosave was right before I stepped onto the moving piece, so it wasn't that big of a deal. Other code execution bugs were enemy NPCs freezing in their tracks and people repeating their voice lines. Nothing however comes close to the visual bug that tested my gamer intuition and sheer determination to the very limits as the one I'm going to show you right now. Strap in, boys.
Keep up now, we gonna fly. You ready? Now let's go to the depths of hell! Elephant rock! Sorry to keep you waiting.
Sure, giant robot elephant. Doesn't even faze me anymore. Awesome!
I love you, baby. You ready?
You have got to be fucking kidding me.
Nick toss.
I guess you don't really need to see the boss to defeat it. As long as you have your minimap on display, the enemy isn't that much of a challenge. Also, that was the first time during my playthrough when the lock-on feature actually helped me a bit instead of trying to drive me insane. So yeah, it's safe to say the remaster of Lollipop Chainsaw is in need of mending, but I'm sure that people have already sent tons of bug reports, so I won't be surprised if some of those issues will have been resolved by the time this video makes it on YouTube. The game can totally be played with a mouse and keyboard. In fact, I think the default settings are quite intuitive and easy to remember. The only reason why I decided to torture myself with an Xbox controller was because I wanted to get the authentic experience. Rest assured I'll be doing the time trials my way. Nothing really negative pops up in my mind when it comes to the soundtrack. In my opinion, the songs list is pretty good and it fits the tone of the remaster. Throughout the game you can hear a surprisingly large number of guitar-based genres like hard rock, psychedelic, pop punk, heavy metal, sometimes even bordering death metal with a lot of nasty palm muting, slow beat down sections, extracurriculars, long double bass passages and even some melodic Norse folk motifs. Other genres you may encounter are a couple of bubbly pop songs, old-timey techno, funk, trance and also some cool fusions between rock and EDM. I did however notice that people who played the console release back in 2012 are discontent with the fact that pretty much every single one of the licensed tracks has been replaced due to copyright issues, so I get it. It's like playing flat out without listening to Demon Speeding or Nickelback's Only Good Song. It's just not the same, but then again, that was probably the single viable solution for Lollipop Chainsaw to continue existing on digital stores, which is much better than it being delisted for eternity. So I'll take it. In conclusion, Lollipop Chainsaw RePOP is a rather decent game. It reminded me of that blissfully ignorant, old-school depiction of what the United States look like according to Japanese people, but it's also purposefully satirical and exaggerated to make us laugh. It almost feels like a hot take on America's biggest export, music and entertainment, wrapped in the form of satisfying combat and quick-time event campiness. That said, the game doesn't come across as insensitive or offensive, but rather as a true piece of art, made with love and care by people who really want to mash together Elvis Presley's fashion choice with late 90s aesthetics. Lollipop Chainsaw is the ultimate female power fantasy because you're Julia Starling, a cheerleader, a girl who's aware her beauty can be as dangerous as a spike trap, but so is her chainsaw that runs on magic. Thanks for watching. If you found this review entertaining, make sure to hit the like and share buttons. Also, subscribing to my channel incentivizes me to make more videos like this one, and yeah, tell me about your experience with Lollipop Chainsaw, whether you enjoyed it or not, because I personally had an absolute blast with this game. Anyway, we'll see each other in the next video. Stay awesome guys. I'm out.